Let's talk commas. Put a comma before for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so when it joins two independent clauses. So, independent clause 1, the game was over. Independent clause 2, the crowd refused to leave the park. We can connect those two independent clauses together with a coordinating conjunction and a comma. Same thing in the next example. The sky was blue. That's an independent clause. The birds were singing. That's an independent clause. We can connect those two independent clauses together with a coordinating conjunction and a comma. But keep in mind that we don't always put a comma beside any old coordinating conjunction. Sometimes a coordinating conjunction connects two predicates that share the same subject. Here's what I mean. Let's look at these two independent clauses. Tyree mowed 3 lawns. Tyree earned $60. Tyree mowed 3 lawns is an independent clause. Tyree earned $60 is an independent clause. Are these two sentences redundant? Yes. Does redundancy make for boring reading? Yes. So we want to do something else. We don't need to repeat Tyree twice. There are other ways around this, but a great idea is to have two predicates share the same subject. It flows much better. How that works is we keep Tyree at the beginning of the sentence and mowed 3 lawns, that's predicate number 1, and earned $60, that's predicate number 2, get to share the same subject. So we have our subject, predicate number 1, coordinating conjunction, predicate number 2. Now, the thing is that both of these predicates have equal value. They are both equally important, so we don't want to prioritize one over the other. Tyree mowed 3 lawns, Tyree earned $60. We want to keep those equally important, so we don't want to separate the second predicate from the subject in any way. So we do not want to have a comma there next to that coordinating conjunction. So remember, when we use a compound predicate like this, we don't want to prioritize one predicate over the other. They're both parallel elements. They both are equally important, so we want them to both share the same subject. No comma. Here's another example. The Stegosaurus was around 9 meters in length and had 17 plates along its back that arose from the skin rather than being attached to the skeleton. So again, two predicates both sharing the same subject, connected together with the coordinating conjunction and. And again, you'll notice there's no comma there because we don't want to separate the second predicate from its subject. Okay, so use a comma to separate words, phrases, and clauses when written in a series of 3 or more coordinate elements. Now, in the CPE style book, they ask that you don't use what's called a serial comma, unless there might be confusion if you don't have one there. Most of the time there's no confusion. So they'd rather you don't use that last comma. So the serial comma, if it were in this coming sentence, would be right after hat and before and. But I've left it out to show you what it looks like without a serial comma. So Jack walked into my office, comma, took off his hat and sat down. Use commas to set off items in dates, geographical names and addresses, and to set off titles after names. January 22nd, 2007, was a momentous day in his life. Now, most people remember to put the comma after the 22, but a lot of people forget to put it after the year. So don't be one of those people. Don't forget, you want to not only separate the day from the year, you also want to separate the year from, or you want to offset that year from the rest of the sentence. And the same goes when we have a city and a state, or a city and a country, or a city and a province. In this case, Birmingham, Alabama. We want to not only have a comma between the city and the country, state, or province, but we also want a comma after that second part of the element. So after the city or the state or the country. Use a comma after an introductory word, phrase, or clause. To get a seat, comma, we have to arrive by 7:30 p.m. So, to really understand why this is necessary, think about the most important part of this sentence. The independent clause in this sentence actually starts with the word we. So we have to arrive by 7:30 p.m. is the most important part of this sentence. So we want to be prioritizing that. We have this additional information to get a seat, but we want it to be very clear to the reader where the independent clause starts, even if consciously the reader is unaware of what we're doing here. This helps the reader comprehend what's being said. So this helps to clarify what we're writing about. So to get a seat is introductory material, so we set it off with a comma, and then we know that the independent clause starts with we. We have to arrive by 7:30 p.m. That's where the important part of the sentence starts. So keep that in mind, whether it's a single word, a word like finally. We often set that off. A word like however can be at the beginning of a sentence, and we can set it off. A word like slowly. Sometimes we use that as an introductory word. Some of those little tag kind of introductory phrases, such as at one time, comma, da 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 da. And then, of course, we also have dependent clauses that can come at the beginning of a sentence, and we want to follow those with a comma so that, again, we can see where the independent clause starts. Use a comma to separate tag questions and other sharply contrasted coordinate elements. The new chairs aren't very comfortable, comma, are they? So this is very sharply contrasted, so set it off with a comma. Use commas to set off words used in direct address. We've all seen the internet meme, let's eat grandma, no comma. So sometimes it can be confusing if we don't set off the person we're talking to with a comma. And that's why we do it, so that it's very clear that we're talking to someone directly. That's why it's called direct address. Use commas to set off mild interjections and after yes and no. Yes, I will be glad to go. My hopes, to tell the truth, had fallen to a new low. So remember how we use those dashes to set off a strong interjection, a break in the sentence? This is a more common usage. This is a mild interjection. So we want to show that that's not essential to the meaning of the sentence. Use commas after conjunctive adverbs or transition words such as however, therefore, accordingly, then, and etc. So we talked about this earlier. Often we'll have a conjunctive adverb at the beginning of a sentence or right after a semicolon. And we want to show that that's not part of the independent clause, so we set it off with a comma. Use commas to set off all non-essential modifiers. Sarah, who is wearing red shorts today, received the highest mark on the exam. So we know that who is wearing red shorts today is not vital to the meaning of the sentence. It's extra information. Use a comma to separate two or more coordinate adjectives that modify the same noun. Now this is a tricky bit, so I'm going to explain. The noisy, enthusiastic class assembled in the stadium. So in this case, we want to use a comma. Noisy modifies class, enthusiastic modifies class. And you might have noticed that these two adjectives are interchangeable. We could just as easily say the enthusiastic noisy class. However, there are a number of modifying word types that you do not need to set off with commas because they will always be in the same order. Size and color are two of those. She picked the small blue flower from the garden. You would not say the blue small flower. You would only ever say the small blue flower. Now you could go and you could memorize the order of all of these categories of modifiers, but usually we can hear this with our ear. So the enthusiastic noisy class, that makes sense. I'm fine with that. But the blue small flower sounds really odd. Another way you can tell is by adding and. The noisy and enthusiastic class, it's okay. She picked the small and blue flower. Not so much. It sounds odd to our ear. So small size will always come before blue, a color. Just try it out. Use commas to set off expressions or attributions, or sometimes we call them dialogue tags, like he said or she replied. I can build the bookcase, comma, she said. They explained, comma, you should wear a helmet when you ride a bike.